So he sent the cops coming at me aggressive for this huge accusation that was not clear, not real. They looked through my car. They didn't release me until that gentleman said that I made a mistake. This is a normal thing for me. This is a normal thing for a lot of brown people in Cheyenne, for a lot of black people in Cheyenne.
Hello and welcome back to Wyoming Watch from the Wyoming Tribune Eagle. I'm Noah Zahn, your state government reporter here. This week we're bringing you the second part of a two-part episode, where last week you heard from Laramie County Sheriff Brian Kozak about his office's new partnership with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE. This week we're sharing another conversation offering a different perspective on the implementation of the changes to immigration law enforcement in Cheyenne. Last Thursday, our crime and public safety reporter, Ivy Secrest, spoke with Antonio Serrano, who is the advocacy director for the ACLU of Wyoming. That's who you heard at the start of the show. Serrano discussed some of his concerns with the new partnership, the true intentions behind it, and how it could negatively impact minorities in Laramie County. Here's that conversation now.
For months, the Laramie County Sheriff's Office has been pursuing one of the most aggressive 287G agreements in the states, obtaining the jail enforcement model, the warrant service model, and task force model agreements. These contracts allow deputies to perform certain duties that ICE would typically perform after undergoing 40 hours of training. 25 officers were sworn in by ICE to serve under these agreements. Today, I'm here with Antonio Serrano with the ACLU of Wyoming to discuss what this means for our local community, trust, and public safety. Antonio, it's lovely to have you.
Right on. Thank you for having me here.
I want to start out, we've talked quite a bit about these agreements, and I want to start out with addressing the narrative of public safety that our local law enforcement has continually discussed when promoting these agreements.
Yeah. It's something we've heard kind of repeated over and over and over in the community and on the news and everywhere. And Kozak said, even that they wouldn't be conducting any immigration raids, but only focusing on immigrant folks who have committed crimes and who have been caught doing criminal activities. The ICE field officer from Denver said that this gives them the ability to disrupt criminal operations, and they can take bad actors out of our community and out of our country. He actually said that immigrants want ICE in our communities. And he said a lot of the immigrant communities, they don't want illegal aliens in their communities either, because they're the ones that are victimized. So I guess my response to that is, who the hell is this Fed Robert talking to? Because as an advocate who has dedicated his life to working in these communities, being part of these communities, connecting with the advocates who spend every day working personally with people in community, that's not how that community feels. They do not want ICE in their community. ICE is what's tearing apart their families. When it comes to ICE, it's simply because they're not part of our community. They're not connected to it. In that quote I just read, he said, illegal aliens in their communities, which shows us, even in his own words, they're not part of us. They don't care about your buddy at work, that works his butt off next to you every day. They don't care about your neighbor and their kids. They don't care about people in Wyoming. They're just trying to profit, honestly. And the truth about it is, which came out recently in the Wildfire story, is that most people arrested by ICE between January 20th and 26th this year, they didn't have any criminal convictions, according to ICE's own data. ICE is trying to arrest 3,000 people a day nationally, which means ICE arrests in Wyoming have tripled. The increase in arrests have built a system that relies on local law enforcement alerting ICE and actively collaborating with them to detain immigrant folks. And the people that are going there are not criminals. Their own data shows that in 2024, 73% of the people they detained had criminal charges. In 2025, 42%. So the data itself shows that they're not. And there's been a lot of studies done on this. 60% immigrants are 60% less likely to commit or be incarcerated than U.S.-born men. They're 50% less likely to be arrested for violent crimes. They're 26% less likely to be convicted of a homicide. Incarceration rates between immigrants and U.S. folks have always been like, it's always been this way. It hasn't changed. It's been consistent. And this is like this because immigrant folks and people who are part of immigrant communities, because so many families are mixed status, there's a fear of being targeted as it is, because they know, like, if they're not careful, they could get messed up and they'd have to be taken away. So a lot of folks are like over the top careful. I mean, I don't meet very many folks from that community that speed. I don't meet very many folks from that community who do anything like that I hear the average Wyoming or see the average Wyoming I do. So it's not them committing these crimes. So my question to Sheriff Kozak and to this the ICE office director is, what criminal operations are they talking about? What are they really talking about? Because like the data doesn't show what they're talking about, you know?
Mm-hmm. I know. So Laramie County Sheriff Brian Kozak specifically mentioned in his press conference yesterday human trafficking and drug trafficking, which is the two types of crime that probably get the most national attention in relation to immigration. And he repeated multiple times that he has no interest in arresting people who call in tips, that he doesn't want to sever the relationship between immigrant communities and officers by making them feel like they can't call for help when they need it. I'm curious, from your work with local immigrant communities, how does that goal relate to this plan of arresting people for human trafficking, drug trafficking, alongside immigration violations?
So, you know, like, it's a foothold and it's an excuse to get in. I've seen that with a lot of people in power. They'll say one thing about a policy, a bill, or a law, that, you know, what they are trying to do with it, but then in actuality they use it as a foothold to go farther and chip away at people's rights. Human trafficking, it's a problem. No one can deny that. And, you know, is it a bigger problem than we see in the reporting? Yeah, for sure. But we're not being invaded by immigrant traffickers in Wyoming. We're not. That's just not happening. Like in 2024, there was only 17 cases identified here in Wyoming, 9 of which were labor trafficking, which we can kind of guess who was impacted by that. In 2023, there was 12 cases that were identified. So yeah, it's a problem. And yeah, those people deserve justice or should get justice. But I know Kozak can do that without ICE. Because back in 2016, when he was police chief, he said, I want to make sure I'm doing this the right way, when he was talking about working on stopping trafficking. He put his detectives through 350 hours of training. The department's victim advocates went through 100 hours of training to assist with sex trafficking and enforcement. And he's even said, our police officers here in Cheyenne Police Department have had more training in human trafficking than the FBI agents have had. And in July of 2016, he led a sting for Frontier Days and was able to arrest 13 people, only 2 of which were from out of state. The rest were locals. So when it comes to this, like, it's not immigrants doing it. And like Sheriff Kozak was able to do this without ICE then. He was able to, like, give his department training. He was able to, like, get support. And he did it without breaking trust then. And it's not happening the same way here, you know, at all. Because, like, my conversations in community says, you know, people are scared to call them. They don't know who they can trust. We hear stories of state patrol profiling people, arresting people, and turning people in. And, like, no one knows who they can call for help anymore from the immigrant community and from people who are part of immigrant communities. So, like, the trafficking thing, like, I challenge Kozak, show us the numbers, show us the data, like, show us where the problem is so we can maybe get to the root of it. Work with people in the community who, like, can help you do it like you did before. We don't need ICE to do that, you know?
One of the aspects of this that COSAC has uniquely brought into these agreements is training for his deputies to assist people in getting visas. So when we're talking about human trafficking, what I'm hearing you saying is a lot of the times maybe the perpetrator of the human trafficking isn't an immigrant, but perhaps the victims are. And two visas that COSAC has brought up is the U visa and the T visa. And those are both visas intended to help victims of crime obtain legal status in the U.S. And I'm curious, though he's put it in his policy, though he's had these 25 deputies go through training surrounding those visas, do you believe that they will actually implement helping people get these visas alongside these 287G contracts?
Yeah, so I was surprised that was brought up, that he had said that this is going to allow victims of trafficking to be able to, have a path to staying. Well, there is no contract between the feds and local sheriffs that can create a path for visas. There's none. That power only comes from Congress. They're the only ones who can do that. I've read through the contracts that Sheriff Kozak has signed. There's nowhere in there that says anything related to visas. And with these visas, when he talks about it in that way, it seems like it's easy. A lot of people always have this idea of it's just fill out paperwork, just fill out your form, just get in line, do it the quote unquote right way. But people don't understand what that really means. People can pay upwards of $10,000 for a lawyer to work on their case. When you're struggling paycheck to paycheck, I've been that person struggling paycheck to paycheck. I couldn't afford to go to the doctor. Like a lot of people in Wyoming can't afford to go to the doctor. It's not there for them. So with the T visas, there are a number of these that are granted, but there's a cap at 5,000 per year for the whole country. That limit is very rarely met. They hardly ever actually get to 5,000 people. It's usually closer to about 2,000 to get approved a year across the whole country. And these thing that I want people to recognize is these visas are available without a 287G agreement. You don't need that contract to get this visa or apply for this visa. There's no legal connection between deputizing a sheriff to do ICE enforcement and issuing a T visa. There's none whatsoever. So Sheriff Kozak doesn't need a 287G to give support to this community in the way that he says that he wants to. He can do that without it. There's nothing stopping him. And with the U visas, there's a little bit more allowed of them, $10,000 a year. These are broader visas for victims of crime, but these have really long wait times. And same with the filling out the asylum stuff. Everything is long waiting lines, and depending on the country you come from. Mexico has a long waiting line versus other countries. With the U visas, they also require the victim to verify cooperation with law enforcement on their form when applying, and this has to be done by, I believe, some form of leadership in law enforcement. They have to get their signature. This is just like the T visas. Sheriff Kozak doesn't need a 287G to do this. He could do this right now. He could be doing this today. He doesn't need this agreement to do that. So I'm wondering, why is Kozak not being honest with us about this? What is the real reason? Why is he making this claim about visas when it's not real? It just takes a little bit of reading online to see how this works to no, it's not. That's not how it works. So.
For our listeners, the U visa is typically for domestic violence victims, and the T visa is specifically for victims of human trafficking. Mm-hmm. So if you were trafficked into this country, you can apply for that if you are a victim of domestic violence, and I believe it can testify to the violent crimes of your abuser, and should not return to the country that you were from with your abuser. Mm-hmm. That's when a U visa is granted, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you mentioned what is the real reason. And if the public isn't convinced by the public safety narrative, if they aren't convinced by the human trafficking and drug trafficking narrative, the next step in this is there is a financial aspect of these contracts. The jail has current agreements have the jail slotted at 100 spots open for ICE detainees at $120 a day. And then that we don't have the exact numbers yet, it is expected that Laramie County Sheriff's Office will receive additional financial reimbursement. ICE has been advertising income reimbursement up to $1,000, I believe, per deputy that has gone through the training. So do you think that financial incentives are what's incentivizing this, or do you think that there are other things at play here?
I think there's financial stuff definitely has a big part in it. With the lawmakers cutting property taxes and that tax revenue that funds the county and local governments, it's putting a strain on a lot of these services out there. For example, people who are doing it for money, Sheriff Cope from Uintah County is currently getting paid $66 a day to house undocumented folks in his jail. He's expecting to make up to $120 per person per day very soon. And he was very open. I'm using this to pay for raises. I'm using this to pay for wages. He's making his department dependent on these federal dollars from immigration. What happens when there's a different president? What happens when there's one who doesn't keep sending that funding down? What's going to happen to those departments then? It's going to be just like the boom and bust that Wyoming always suffers from. It's the same thing that we were talking about during Wild Say No. Like, you do this, it might be a boom to some people for a short time, but it's going to bust and it's going to go hard. It's people are going to lose homes. It's going to cause some real damage. And other sheriffs, like Sheriff Grossnickel from Sweetwater County, he's getting about $120 a day per person. And Sheriff Harlan from Natrona County is getting $95 a day per person. So with how important Laramie County Jail is to ICE, geographically, strategically, how much are they paying Kozak? I would imagine it's, if not similar to Sweetwater County, I would imagine more. I know that the Laramie County Jail, that's a big part of this deportation machine that's been set up across Wyoming with these 287Gs, all along I-25 and I-80, basically securing half the state with the help of the Highway Patrol. So I think there's a big money factor in this, and I think you can't really deny it. I don't think you can.
So yeah, we know that Kozak in these contracts is getting $120 a day per detainee. Those funds, as of now, go to the county, and there are more opportunities for reimbursement across the line. I misspoke earlier. It's not income reimbursement. It is a monetary performance award of up to $1,000 in addition to reimbursement for salary and benefits, which is a coverage of up to 25%, which ICE has advertised. Now, we don't have any contract saying that that's what Kozak is going to get at this point, but we do know he is pursuing it. He has stated that those funds aren't going to go to annual expenses. They're going to go back into this program, that this program will be essentially funding itself until it's no longer needed, that he doesn't want the jail to be reliant on it financially. If that's the case, is there still a concern for the financial incentives associated with this program?
Yeah, because you're detaining human beings for private gain, and for this, you're fueling the system that is just separating families for profit. To the people who are working on these construction sites, on all these projects, whatever field they're in across Wyoming, they're building Wyoming, and they don't see that hard work. They don't see their contribution to the state, and they just see dollar signs. And when we dehumanize people in that way, for one, it's gross, but it's not surprising coming from people in power, not in Wyoming, for real.
Outside of the immigrant community that you've spent a lot of time cultivating a relationship with, there is a bit of a split in the Cheyenne community about whether or not this is a good thing. There are people who are incredibly supportive of these programs that are very much invested in seeing this through. There are people that don't necessarily care about the immigration and humanitarian aspect of it, but are very concerned about the financial aspect. And there are people outside of the immigrant community who are concerned about the humanitarian and immigration aspect and the general policy of deportation in general. For those who are incredibly supportive of this program and are persuaded by the public safety narrative, are persuaded by the financial gain, are persuaded by the opportunity to pursue visas that has been narratively coupled with these agreements, what would you want them to know?
I think look at the people who work alongside you, because I've spent my whole life doing labor jobs here in Wyoming, doing everything from roofing to concrete to fencing, you name it, I did it here. In that heat, in that cold, in that wind, I know what that feels like to work like that here in Wyoming. And it doesn't matter what job I was doing, there was always immigrant folks who were there, working hard, getting up every morning, making sure that they can earn $1 for their family, just to try and give their kids a better chance. And no matter who I talk to, lawmakers have told me, well, I have a friend who's immigrant. I know a person who's an immigrant. Everybody knows one, but I don't know how often they really talk to them about how this makes them feel, how this makes their family feel, what they think about that maybe privileged folks don't have to think about. Look at the person next to you who's working his ass off, excuse my language, but to build Wyoming like you are. Look at your neighbors. Look at the kids that your kids play with. Like, just see the humanity in the hardworking family that is just like you.
When we're talking about these families, whether people here are here with legal status, without status, a part of mixed status families or not, have a criminal history or not, we are talking about people that are living in the state of Wyoming, regardless. Throughout these agreements. I'm curious, we've talked about community trust a bit. COSAC has kind of reiterated that that's just a barrier that they're going to have to overcome, that they've always had to overcome this barrier of immigrant communities not trusting law enforcement, sometimes because of the way that the law enforcement is in the state, but also because of the way that law enforcement is where these people are from. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, how does community trust look right now in the immigrant community?
Yeah, it's something I hear every time I talk to somebody who's impacted or close to somebody impacted. Kozak saying he's not worried about eroding trust. It's crazy because it's happening now. I've talked with families who have documentation, records that show that there's a lot more collaboration happening between local law enforcement and ICE than is publicized. That, there's people snitching on families when it comes to law enforcement is doing that. And it's breaking up families, like every day here in Cheyenne. So when he says, he has a good relationship to the community, I've done trainings teaching people about their rights with hundreds of immigrant folks across the state, a lot here in Cheyenne. I work with advocates who work across Wyoming, who are connected to thousands of families. So when he says he has a good relationship, who's he talking about? Because the people we are connected to and talk about who are directly impacted, feeling it every day, who we spent years building relationships with and trust, who is he talking to that's telling him that the trust is all good? Because I can tell you this is also trickling into Chicano folks here in Cheyenne who are not immigrants, who might not even be part of the immigrant community, who have been here for a long time, and they're saying, like, I'm being profiled. My daughter was profiled, and what do I do? Like, why are they doing this to us? So it's not just impacting immigrants. When you profile brown people, you're profiling all brown people, and they're feeling it, and they're talking about it. I can tell you that they are. One thing that really I think about when I talk about trust with, specifically Kozak, is one thing that erodes trust big time is breaking your word. And I remember standing in a church here in Cheyenne while Sheriff Kozak stood in front, or at the time Police Chief Kozak, promising to not target the immigrant community, promising to not collaborate with ICE in that way, promising to stand up for us, because he said then that he knows how collaborating with ICE erodes trust, and he didn't want to do that. He said he wanted people to be able to call him when they're scared. And he shook my hand and made a promise to me right in my face that he wouldn't target the immigrant community. And one thing that really kind of comes back to my head every time I think about this is, like, something I learned growing up here in Wyoming is, like, and heard everywhere from when I lived in the country, from when I lived in the city. I always heard this is, like, a man's only as good as his word. You know what I mean? And him standing in front of a whole church, standing in front of a whole community, shaking the hands of leaders in that community and making promises and then breaking that, when he's running for office, when he's elected in office, it's disappointing. It is. He made a commitment to always work with us, and that commitment hasn't been met. And it's sad. It is sad. And people see that. If he spent any real time in immigrant communities in Cheyenne, pointing to your brown deputies doesn't mean that you understand the immigrant community. You're not part of it. You don't come from it. You don't know how we feel. It's just the reality. You can say you have a brown friend or you have a brown coworker or that you hired immigrants or whatever, but you don't know what it's like to lose your dad. You don't know what it's like to see your mom taken away from you. You don't know what that's like. To have to call them while they're in a jail cell in Aurora, he don't know what that's like. So I think if he spent more time actually talking to folks in community who are really impacted, he'd probably get a different perspective on it. And he'd probably find out what people really think about his mug that says El Jefe, because that's not what they call him, for sure.
You mentioned a bit there racial profiling and the impacts of this on not just the immigrant community, but the Chicano community. Wednesday, I asked Sheriff Kozak how he could be sure that his deputies wouldn't participate in racial profiling outside of the fact that they had undergone trainings and that there were policies in place. And he referred to his time working in Arizona, a state that has had some pretty negative experiences with racial profiling and 287G contracts, specifically the task force model, which is what the vast majority of these deputies have been trained for. Mm-hmm. And his response was that his policy is very different, that his policy has limits, that they did not have limits in Arizona. And I am curious, do you think that matters?
Do you need limits to not profile somebody? You can't depend on the integrity of your officers? Like, do you really? Like, that's the relationship that you have with the people working under you, that you have to have policies in order to make sure they're not doing wrong? That doesn't say, like, he thinks very highly of folks that works for him. And, like, this is a problem that I know I experience pretty regularly. I've been profiled more than once. A story that I shared pretty frequently is I was taking my dad to get on a shuttle at the Red Lion Hotel on the south side, to get on a shuttle to go to the airport, something a lot of people do all the time. Not everybody can make it to the airport and take that time or that money, We're sitting there waiting, and some guy comes out of the hotel and starts recording me, like clearly recording me. And he went back inside. He came back out, did it a second time, went back in. When he came out the third time, I knew what was going to happen. And sure enough, here come the lights. Surrounded by 3 PD, 3 sheriffs, spotlights, hands on their guns, rolling up because there was a Hispanic male who had a woman screaming in his back seat of his car. That's what they were told. So this individual who was recording me sent the cops after me with a lie. He didn't know me. He saw what I looked like, and he made an assumption and then decided to act on that assumption. So he sent the cops coming at me aggressive for this huge accusation that was not clear, not real. And they looked through my car. They didn't release me until that gentleman said that I made a mistake. And this is a normal thing for me. This is a normal thing for a lot of brown people in Cheyenne, for a lot of black people in Cheyenne. It's what we go through all the damn time.
The Wyoming Tribune Eagle reached out to Sheriff Kozak Wednesday regarding several statements that Serrano made during our interview. In response, Kozak said he could guarantee racial profiling will not be an issue, saying he values the U.S. Constitution more than anything else. He also acknowledged that it'll take time to build trust and said he intends to have bilingual deputies engaging with the community to educate them on the sheriff's policy and help them immigrate legally. He wrote, quote, "A distrust of police is cultural and generational because of police corruption in their home countries. It's difficult to break that down. However, our agency will continue to build relationships and be transparent with our policy. The key is for us to be true to our word." End quote. He highlighted his extensive work in Arizona, where he witnessed what can happen when the 287G program is done for political reasons and is not managed properly. In Arizona, he ordered his officers to stay clear of Maricopa County, where the sheriff's office was engaging in the 287G program, because he did not agree with their sweeps, and has set up the Laramie County program to have strict rules, not allowing sweeps, and only allowing deputies to question immigration status following the investigation of a crime. Kozak wrote, "I hope Antonio will help us build those bridges. I believe the ACLU should help people to immigrate legally and be a resource for those who want to do the right thing. Ultimately, people need to follow the laws of the country that they want to immigrate to."
Now, here's Taylor Staples, our arts and entertainment reporter, with a roundup of upcoming events in Cheyenne and Laramie County this week.
Today, there's a Cheyenne Symphony Orchestra Lunch and Learn session ahead of their concert this weekend that takes place at noon at the Laramie County Library, as well as a tamale making class from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m., also at the library. Later, there's a poetry reading and musical performance by 3-time Poet Laureate winner Joy Harjo at 7 p.m. at the Clay Pathfinder building at LCCC. Also, the Nightmare on 17th Street Haunted House continues at the Knights of Pythias Lounge from 7 to 11 p.m., and there's another night of Cheyenne Little Theater Players Newsies at 7 p.m. at the Mary Godfrey Playhouse. On Saturday, the morning kicks off with 3 craft shows, one at VFW 1881 at 9 a.m., one at Afflerbach Elementary at 9 a.m., and an autumn market at the Frontier Mall at 10 a.m. Then we also have a Walk to End Alzheimer's event starting at 10:15 a.m., cat yoga at 11 a.m. at Cats and Coffee Connections, a local author celebration at the library from 2 to 4 p.m., Bingo Loco at the Lincoln at 7 p.m., and the Cheyenne Symphony Orchestra concert at 7:30 p.m. at the Cheyenne Civic Center. Then Newsies has another show at 7 p.m., and the Nightmare on 17th Street continues again at 7 p.m. On Sunday, October 12th, there is Cat Bingo from 1 to 3 p.m. at Cats and Coffee Connections, and this is the last day to see Newsies at 2 p.m. On Monday, October 13th, there's a fall foliage walk and picnic at the High Plains Arboretum from 10 a.m. to noon. On Tuesday, October 14th, there's a Senior Planet event regarding technology use from 10 a.m. to 11:15 a.m. at the library. An introduction to watercolor at the Cheyenne Creativity Center is from 6 to 8 p.m., and there's a music industry social hour at the Lincoln from 6:30 to 9 p.m. Then, on Wednesday, October 15th, there's a paranormal panel chat from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. at the library. And finally, on Thursday, October 16th, there's a young adult writing club from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. at the library, and a Thankful Thursday event at the Lincoln Way Event Hall to honor the Cheyenne Frontier Days Old West Museum starting at 4 p.m. For a full list of events, go to wyomingnews.com and double-check prices and times as they're subject to change.
And finally, before we close out today, here's a quick recap of some of our top stories and headlines from this past week. Another data center broke ground in Cheyenne on Tuesday, starting a $1.2 billion development on 115 acres at Campstool Business Park. Governor Mark Gordon and Cheyenne Mayor Patrick Collins welcomed the developer, Related Digital of New York-based related companies, to Wyoming, praising the company for its technological innovations and offering thanks for its unanticipated community support. Police have arrested a Cheyenne man Thursday in connection with the fatal shooting of a 19-year-old that occurred nearly 3 weeks ago in the parking lot of King Soopers. Thursday morning, 21-year-old Mansoor Ali was booked on 1 count of second-degree murder and 4 counts of aggravated assault in relation to a road rage incident that resulted in the death of a 19-year-old on September 20th. A shooting in Fort Collins involving an F.E. Warren Air Force Base airman has been ruled a murder-suicide as an act of domestic violence, according to the Larimer County Coroner's Office. In the early hours of September 30th, Fort Collins Police Services responded to reports of a shooting in the 100 block of West Fairway Lane in Fort Collins. Authorities with the 90th Missile Wing confirmed the death of another active-duty airman who was found deceased on base Wednesday morning. No other information has been released at this time. And finally, a local woman charged with stealing thousands from veterans organizations was sentenced Monday afternoon to 6 months in jail, followed by 5 years probation, in line with a plea bargain by Laramie County District Judge Nathaniel Hibben. That's all for this week on Wyoming Watch. Thank you for tuning in, and be sure to check back next Friday for more.